the thing is he knew people who were there. He'd served with people who'd fought at the bridge at Arnhem. One of his troop sergeants in his squadron had been at Arnhem. And so it sort of infected me. And also, this is a story that every time a book came out, and even when the time when I wasn't making Second World War history a sort of thing part of my life, I would buy the book, I would read it, and each time I read it, I'd will them on to succeed this one last time and end the war by Christmas. Of course, they never do.
The Battle of Arnhem is one of the best-known stories in British military history, but there's a fresh perspective from Al Murray, whose new book takes you right to the centre of the daring but doomed attack. Arnhem, Black Tuesday, tells the story of a single chaotic, catastrophic day 80 years ago this coming week, through the eyes of the participants as events unfold. The 1st Airborne was trying to secure a vital bridgehead across the Rhine with the aim of ending the Second World War before Christmas 1944. And I'm delighted to say that the comedian and historian Al Murray joins me now. Good afternoon, Al.
Hello there. Hello.
Anyone who's seen the great Richard Attenborough film, A Bridge Too Far, will be familiar with the Battle of Arnhem. Of course, it was part of Operation Market Garden. Just remind us of the basics for people who aren't aware, because this was a pivotal moment in the war.
Well, yes, or a potentially pivotal moment, I think is the thing. So what happens is that after the battle for Normandy, after D-Day, it looks like the Germans are on the run, and Field Marshal Montgomery thinks, if I can go around the German defensive Siegfried line, which is in the west of Germany, and not have to fight my way through that, maybe that will speed things along. The Germans will collapse, and the war will be over by Christmas. I mean, and even saying that phrase sounds almost sort of trite in a weird way. But basically, what he has at his disposal is a thing called the 1st Allied Airborne Army, which is lots of people who can parachute or land by glider behind enemy lines. So this plan, Market Garden, is hatched to land American and British airborne soldiers along the bridges by glider or by parachute, all the way 60 miles up into Holland, and capture at the top of this this corridor, or airborne carpet as they call it, the bridge over the Neder Rhine at Arnhem, which is the last bridge over the Rhine before you then can turn east and get into Germany and avoid having to fight your way through the German defences. And it's this wildly ambitious thing that hangs by a thread, and as you said, is doomed or fated. But what I've tried to do with the book is take that away and put you in the position of the people who don't know it's doomed, don't know it's fated, and who actually have to deal with the circumstances as they play out then and there.
Yeah, we'll come on to the book itself in just a moment. First of all, why did you want to write about the Battle of Arnhem itself, Al? I mean, you've got a bit of a personal connection, haven't you?
Well, kind of, yes. My father did his national service, and then after that, was an airborne soldier, was a parachuting sapper, wore the maroon beret and all that stuff. And when I was a kid, I would go watch him jump out of the balloon on Salisbury Plain and stuff like that. So I sort of associated him with this thing. And then he took me to see the Dickie Attenborough film, A Bridge Too Far, when it came out. And he sat there harumphing at the screen because there's stuff wrong in it and things he didn't like. And the actors' haircuts were all lousy and all this sort of thing. But the thing is he knew people who were there. He'd served with people who'd fought at the bridge at Arnhem. One of his troop sergeants in his squadron had been at Arnhem. And so it sort of infected me. And also, this is a story that every time a book came out, and even when the time when I wasn't making Second World War history a sort of thing part of my life, I would buy the book, I would read it, and each time I read it, I'd will them on to succeed this one last time and end the war by Christmas. Of course, they never do. So I've been sort of fascinated with this battle to varying degrees, my whole life, really. And this book is an attempt to put a lid on that, it has to be said.
Yeah, and you say in the introduction how you had originally suggested to your dad that he write about Arnhem, but he was a bit like, well, look, there's nothing new to be said.
That's right, he did say that, yeah.
And in terms of the angle you've taken, you've obviously decided to focus on 24 hours, on this crucial day, on Black Tuesday. So what happens on Black Tuesday specifically?
Well, the long and short of it is, at the start of the day, it looks like there's possibilities and options and things that they can do to change the course of the battle, which has started to unravel quite seriously in the 36 hours it's been going. And by the end of the day, those opportunities are gone. They're over. That is not the situation anymore. And I wanted to sort of zoom in on that because of the circumstances in which they make the decisions are all really, really interesting and sort of mind-boggling. And then also I wanted to look at what does it feel like to start the day thinking you might win a battle that would change the course of the Second World War and end the war by Christmas, and what's it like at the end of the day when it's quite clear that you haven't done that. And so that's the thrust of the book, really.
Because the heroism of John Frost and Two Para, who were there, kind of defending the north side of the bridge, Anthony Hopkins in A Bridge Too Far, incredible. And they knew that, well, they thought that 30 Corps were coming to rescue them, but they never did. Or they kind of got to Arnhem in the end, but too late.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is the thing, is that about the Battle of Arnhem, it's the parachute regiment's proudest honour. And that we've got to not forget that you've also got the Border Regiment, the South Staffordshire Regiment, the King's Own Scottish Borderers, lots of other people, the Royal Engineers, Royal Army Service Corps, loads of other people were there, which is sort of part of the story. But it's the parachute regiment's proudest battle honour, yet it's a defeat. And I've made being a fan of irony and paradox is part of my comedy for a very long time, and to find it a historical event that's ripe with sort of paradox and irony like this, I think is really, really interesting. And we are magnetically drawn culturally to defeats, it seems, and this is an example of one. But the men, as you say, the men who hang on at the bridge, and then the men who fight in the town, and the men who fight in the woods, and the men who fight in the village, the way they endure, and the way in the end they hang on despite some of the decisions made by some of their officers that, on reflection, may seem harebrained, is extraordinary. It's absolutely incredible.
What is it, Al, about the British that makes us kind of love a glorious defeat over some kind of stunning victory? Because you think about Dunkirk, for instance. We take it as a moral victory, but it was a defeat. I mean, it wasn't evacuation.
It was a complete calamity.
Yeah.
I mean, the British Army had been, British Expeditionary Force had been completely routed. I mean, if you're the government at the time in 1940 and that happens on your watch, you're not going to say, "Yeah, we've been defeated."
It's
you're
spin.
Say, you've got to spin it. And Churchill, of course, said wars cannot be won by evacuations. But the part of it is we like the idea that we're the underdog, when in fact, when you look at the balance sheet of the Second World War, we are very much not one of the underdogs in that conflict at all, because of the empire and the wealth we had at our disposal to fight the war. But I don't know, it feels Arnhem has also been, because of the film, and there was a film in the immediately after the war called Theirs Is the Glory, which was shot on the battlefield with men who'd fought there, which is the most amazing cinematic artifact. It's been really lodged in popular culture as that glorious heroic stand, and there's no denying that that's exactly what it was. I mean, I'm not going to write. I'm not so bold as to write a book that says, it was nothing of the sort.
Yeah, true. To what extent, if you go back to Arnhem now, to what extent can you get a sense of the battle?
Well, the thing is the topography of the town, which is actually the thing they, in the end, completely come up against, is exactly the same. And I was there last week because with James Holland, who I do my podcast, We Have Ways of Making You Talk, we also do a YouTube channel where we go to battlefields and literally walk the ground. It's called Walking the Ground. And you walk the places and you get a feel for, you can never tell what it was like, but you can get a feel for what some of the challenges are that they might be facing. And when you go to Arnhem, when you go to the top of what I call in the book, the bottleneck in the town, and you can see exactly the problems that they were facing. And so in that sense, the topography, the geography is essentially the same. One part of the golf course is a battlefield. One part of the battlefield is a golf course now, which is kind of the same all over Europe. Right, wherever you go, there's a golf course where you're going, and this happened here and that happened there, and jokes about bunkers and so on. But the place is essentially the same, where the roads meet and then diverge, and then the railway line cuts across the topography, and the hill falls away. That's the same, and so you can understand what they're up against. I mean, the other remarkable thing about Arnhem is the way they commemorate the battle there. Where when we were there last week, so 2 weeks out from the anniversary, one house in 3 is flying a flag, a Pegasus, blue Pegasus on a maroon flag, in commemoration of the people who fought and died there. It's amazing.
You mentioned your podcast with James Holland, We Have Ways of
Yeah.
Making You Talk, which is brilliant.
Thank you.
It's really, I think it's really nice as a history buff myself, how we've reached this point now where popular history is able to be really explored through podcasts like your own, and we've got The Rest is History and stuff like that, and YouTube channels and whatever. And obviously with your background in comedy, I know you've always been interested in World War II, but did you ever think you'd reached the point where you were able to spend so much of your time doing this?
No, and we have COVID-19 to thank for that turn of events. I was about to go on tour when the pandemic started, and we'd started doing the podcast, James and I, but it was very much a sidebar to my main activity. And then along came the pandemic. They closed the theatres, and I was sort of, what am I going to do? And so we upped the content, and I started really reading a lot and engaging with the subject a whole lot, and our listenership sort of came to us. And so as a result, here I am. You know, this is my second book. I mean, the last book was a series of essays, and I've sort of grasped the nettle of writing about an actual battle with this book. But I mean, I never imagined it. What I do know is that one of my because I did a history degree a very long time ago, and the day I went to university, I met Stuart Lee and Richard Herring, and got involved in doing comedy, and very much put my studies to one side. What I do know is one of my old tutors, my parents have since, befriended him via a friend of theirs. He cannot believe that I've been writing it. He thinks it's wildly improbable that a student of that my level of application and promise might have ended up doing this. It does not compute for him, and I completely understand why, and I'm sympathetic with his point of view.
Well, I suppose it's just the latest chapter in a very rich and varied career. I mean, you
could put it like that if you want.
Yes.
I think he spluttered on his sherry when they told him.
I mean, on a serious point, I mean, you've done the history, you've done the comedy. Yep. I remember when you ran against Nigel Farage for Parliament back in 2015. Although, mind you, he's in there now. Do you ever look back and think, well, in that case, you won the battle but lost the war against him because he got in the end?
You could see it like that, yeah. I mean, he's got to turn up for surgeries now and all that sort of boring stuff. So, I always regarded it as a dodged bullet that I didn't win there. I mean, I never was going to, but yeah, I mean, yes, maybe, he's playing the long game, the long durée and all that, yeah.
How do you think politicians kind of deal with history? Because Johnson liked to kind of cast himself as like a latter-day Churchill. And even Farage, in his way, likes to kind of evoke a sense of a Britain in the past. And look, you're clearly, very interested in World War II, very patriotic man. How do you view the way politicians use history?
Well, the thing about history, and this is sort of my examination of one day has told me this, is you can look at an event and you can find all sorts of things in it and all sorts of different ways of presenting it. And this is the thing, we've seen it with arguments over Winston Churchill in recent years as to who was he, what was he really like, what was he really responsible, what did he really think about this, that, and the other. And there is often in politics there's a sort of crayon sketch of history that gets used quite a lot, and I don't know, when people are, I mean, is a good parallel. When people now go on about Margaret Thatcher, when Conservative politicians, for instance, or Labour people go on about Margaret Thatcher, right? That's, when did she win an election? 50 years ago, pretty much.
Yeah.
Right. That's like Margaret Thatcher going on about Stanley Baldwin. It's like, what? It's ridiculous.
Well, if you were Dominic Sandbrook, you might go on about Stanley Baldwin, but
well, of course, if you are Dominic Sandbrook, then yes, you want that. You want Stanley Baldwin all day long. But this is my point: is that we are hung up on these sort of these ideas of what people are like that matter to people, rather than, is that history really? Is it really history? And what I do like about this is that we're talking about it, and that history is a thing that obviously matters to people, is obviously central to people's cultural expression. And that's the thing I'm actually as interested in as anything else, which is why with the Pub Landlord, there's always been a slab of history in it, because I'm interested in history in the sense of it's the story we tell about ourselves, to ourselves, to establish, try and figure out who we are. And, I'm not an academic historian. I'm off reservation, and that's the wonderful thing about history, is history can go off reservation in a way that, say, physics can't. I can't build a nuclear reactor at home because I'm not allowed to, but I can write a history book.
Al, this has been an absolute pleasure. The book is called Arnhem, Black Tuesday by Al Murray. Al, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
It's a total pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And it is available at timesbookshop.co.uk, where Times Plus members can enjoy a 20% discount on that and thousands of other titles. And just to say, the Battle of Arnhem is also the subject of my new YouTube series, which is produced in this very building. It's called History Undone with James Hansen. So if you search for that on YouTube, you can watch me and a couple of military experts deconstructing Operation Market Garden and the Battle of Arnhem and exploring what might have happened if the Allies had won. Just search for History Undone with James Hansen on YouTube and click subscribe.